Tonight on News 5 Live, a young fisherman shot dead in Dangriga. His family says it's police's fault. Opposition blasts the Briceño administration on COVID, curfew and terminations. But what do they have to say about Montero and the shady land deals? The Maya land rights case goes back to court. And Agriculture Minister says you can have your imported milk, but you'll have to pay. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
It's a fact. that you can access unlimited services with
Good evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Thursday, January 21st. I am Marlene Cuellar. During news time on Wednesday night, shots rang out in the monument site area of Dangriga. A fisherman, Dennis Robinson, from the area had been gunned down. The family believes that this murder is retaliatory and is blaming the police for putting their family at risk. News 5's Dwayne Moody finds out why.
23-year-old Dennis Robinson was waylaid as he was returning home from a nearby shop where he went to purchase ramen noodles for himself and his siblings. As he neared the family yard entrance in the monument site area of Dangriga on his bicycle, a lone gunman emerged from the dark and opened fire on him. Neighbors heard 5 shots, 4 of which his mother says caught him at close range.
My son came home and he wanted to eat noodles than to eat what is here. And because he wanted to eat noodles, I told him, well, okay, if that's the way I want, then you better go buy it. So I asked who else in the house want noodles. And his sisters said that they want noodles as well. So I tell him, well, okay, go to the shop and you buy 7 noodles for you guys. And he, as an honest and obedient child, he jumped on his bicycle and he went and purchased the noodles. And as soon as he came back, just to find out that there was a lone gunman here, who was waiting for him, and the gunman shot him.
By the time Martha Robinson and her family ran onto the street, Dennis was taking his final breath. Police arrived shortly after, processed the scene, and the body taken to the morgue at the Southern Regional Hospital.
When we hear the shots, first thing came to my mind was Dennis. So I told the others, I said, oh my God, Dennis. And I pushed open the door, and as soon as I push open the door, I saw the young man running away with a red shirt and the gun in his hand. So my husband came outside and ran behind him. But for myself and his sisters, we ran towards Dennis so we can see if we can take him to the hospital. But when we got here, he was just taking his last breath. And I noticed he didn't have any pulse.
Dennis was a fisherman. According to his mother, he had no run-ins with the law except for a misdemeanor. So why would anyone want him dead? Marta believes that her son was murdered in retaliation for the shooting death of Roger Blanco, which occurred on November 18, 2020. Dennis's younger brother, Rennick Robinson, was charged for that crime, and the Robinsons believe it is payback. Their mother describes both of them as being victims.
My son, his brother, is Rennick Robinson, is he's at the prison because then he was charged for murder about a month and a half ago, and because of that, those who the friends of the person who was shot, Mr. Blanco, I guess they wanted revenge, and they come back and retaliate.
You personally awaited him?
Yes, exactly. But then I am appealing because then it's a learning process. Renrick didn't commit that crime. Dangriga is small, and we know everybody here in Dangriga. To those who wanted revenge, Dangriga is small. Make sure you go ahead and investigate. Do your own investigation. You don't need to wait on the police. You come and do your own investigation, and you find those who are in charge to retaliate. And my family is not your enemies. My son, who was charged for murder, never did commit the crime. And because he was posted on the media that he was charged with that murder, all of my family now have been put at risk because of that.
News 5 has been reliably informed that the alleged gunman was detained soon after the shooting occurred. Dwayne Moody for News 5.
The United Democratic Party today called a press conference to address matters of national importance. It was held at the party's headquarters on Youth for the Future Drive in Belize City. Opposition leader Patrick Faber was flanked by UDP Senators Michael Perifete and Sheena Pitts, as well as Mesop Area Representative Moses Shine Barrow and UDP attorney Urson Elrington. Of the topics discussed was the curfew. At month's end, the Ministry of Health and Wellness is expected to announce new COVID-19 measures via a statutory instrument. Minister Michelle Shabat says that the new SI will be comprehensive, and it is likely that government will make changes to the curfew. The nationwide curfew was put in place on December 20, 2020 for an indefinite period, but it has received criticism from members of the public and the opposition, the United Democratic Party. The UDP says that this is the first time a curfew has been implemented without declaring the state of emergency and describes it as unconstitutional. Minister of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries Karim Musa explained on Wednesday that a curfew could be implemented via Section 83 of the Public Health Act. But today, the UDP's Michael Perifete says that Musa is mistaken. Perifete says that implementing a curfew for an indefinite period is a show of complete disregard to business owners and employees.
Our major issue, beside the fact it can be illegal what you're doing right now, is how can you have a curfew that restricts people's movement for an indefinite period of time? There must be some cap to a curfew period. I've never seen before a curfew period being set without an end date, unless somebody can correct me, but I've never seen that before. The thing is though, is that when you have a curfew without an end date, it tells us, all of us, or it should tell us, that there is no plan. Normally when you don't have a plan, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're stumbling out of the blocks, you just shut everything down for no reason, and then you decide when you will come out with some SI at the end of this month to determine when curfew will end. to me is a sign that they don't know what they're doing and they're feeling their way in the dark. We believe that the government needs to very quickly say to the Belizean people when the curfew will end.
The opposition also criticized the Briceño administration's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Opposition leader Patrick Faber blasts the government for continuously politicizing the pandemic and blaming the past UDP administration. He says that everything that the Briceño administration has done to battle the pandemic was merely building upon the foundation that the UDP had laid. Faber then criticized the recently passed SI, which gave the Ministry of Health and Wellness sole responsibility for the approval of the importation of tests to detect COVID-19.
Everything that they have done pretty much copied or continued works begun by the United Democratic Party, and that includes the rolling out of these tests, rapid tests that have been done and procured from the time the UDP was there. I am told that there is now a list of designated places that you can get a rapid test, and I am told as well that the government has now taken control of it, which is not necessarily a bad thing, except that we see early signs of corruption already rearing its head in this ordeal. You see, in order to import the tests and to administer the tests at certain institutions, you have to now go and get permission from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And I am reliably informed, in fact, that the games have already begun where only friends and cronies are allowed to import the tests so that these tests can be administered across the country through certain institutions. Those details are still coming to me, and once we get them, but it doesn't seem to matter. It is now very evident that the People's United Party, as my colleague Minister, the Honorable Tracy Tega, in the last House meeting went to great pains to point out, this party is about nepotistic opportunities, and it abounds freely. Apparently everybody's friends, brother, sister, auntie, uncle are able to benefit. And when it comes down to the basics, as the Honorable Shine Barrow said, there is not enough for everyone.
From COVID to alleged corruption, opposition leader Patrick Faber was asked about his colleague, former Minister of Works Rene Montero. The government wants Montero to face criminal charges for alleged acts of corruption during his term in office. The Ministry of Infrastructure Development and Housing has forwarded documents to the Commissioner of Police and the DPP alleging that Montero used the government's assets and resources for his gain. Montero's name also came up during the sitting of the House of Representatives in a land scam. The former Works Minister has yet to be charged, and it is until then the UDP will deal with the matter internally. But for now, Faber says that his party will support no acts of corruption or criminality.
I will not be cornered into one situation with the former minister. In fact, you've heard me on the record say repeatedly that the UDP's leadership will not support any kind of wrongdoing that has happened in the past. We will not go witch hunting. That is not our nature and cannot be our nature if it is our party. But where it is demonstrated that serious wrongdoing has been done by any member, former member of this party, we will deal with those issues and we will confront those issues. The situations, as I said, with specifics later on, when that comes, when it rears its head, if that is the case, then that is our position.
After the People's United Party won the November general elections, the Lands Department was locked down as rumors of UDP cronies taking documents from the office in Belmopan surfaced. It was reported before elections that UDP ministers were issuing out parcels of land to voters. The question was if the issuance was done following the law. Minister of Natural Resources Cordell Hyde had the system shut down, preventing anyone from making payments to their recently received lands. This matter was brought up at the House sitting, and Hyde gave his assurance that the matter will be fixed to allow first-time landowners to make payments. But it seems that the matter still hasn't been fixed, because UDP attorney Urson Ellerington says that the UDP is working with hundreds of persons who want to take court action against the government for not allowing them to make payments.
My law firm sent 114 letters to the Lands Department, advising them that we represented 114 individuals, and those persons were interested in making their purchases as first-time landowners, and their refusal to accept their payments was a breach of the agreement which the government had entered into with these persons. I am happy to announce that a few minutes ago, before coming to this press conference, I received a letter from the Lands Department. Let me get the letter so that I do not misquote them, because I would never want to do such a thing, right, Brother Jules? So I received a letter from the Lands Department in which they confirmed the receipt of those letters on the letter was dated on the 7th day of January, but I believe they received them on the 11th, and that they have agreed to avoid litigation, that my clients can now proceed to the Lands Department and make the payments on those accounts. While we sent in 111 letters on the 11th of January, since that time, we have an additional 300 plus persons who have approached us to represent them to ensure that they are able to pay for their land. And so we will have to reach out and tell individually the 111 persons who the government so far has made the decision that they do not wish to enter into litigation. And I think rightfully so. We would not want to waste any government resources, because it was an absolute lose case for them.
We'll have more from today's press conference later in the newscast. When we come back, the Maya land rights case returns to the CCJ with the first appearance by the new Indigenous minister. The indigenous communities in the South have collectively prevailed in the courts since they initiated legal action against the government of Belize in the 90s. The fight has always been over continued incursions on Maya lands. 6 years ago, the CCJ upheld the ruling of the Court of Appeal in respect of the common law doctrine that indigenous peoples' land rights to customary tenure persist. At the time of the decision, the legal victory was hailed as another milestone achievement in the communal land rights struggle. But not much has changed since, despite a commission being put in place to execute the CCJ's consent order. This morning, the Maya Leaders Alliance and the Attorney General's office appeared before the appellate jurisdiction for a compliance hearing. News 5's Isani Cayetano has this report.
In April 2015, the Caribbean Court of Justice, in handing down a decision affirming Maya customary land rights in Toledo District, also read a consent order which the government of Belize is duty-bound to honor. Since then, a commission was formed to work with representatives of the indigenous community in the implementation of that order under the previous administration. Regrettably, the pace at which that process is being undertaken has been sluggish, to say the least.
The Caribbean Court of Justice consent order and decision came about in 2015. This is almost 6 long years ago. By this time, we had anticipated to have achieved a significant part of the implementation of this decision. Unfortunately, that is not the situation. At today's compliance hearing, the Caribbean Court of Justice continued to maintain supervision of the implementation process. And so at today's compliance hearing, one of the salient points that the Maya have made since 2015, and in fact prior to that, is with respect to the urgency to preserve the status quo of our lands.
The Maya Leaders Alliance, on behalf of the 38 indigenous communities in the South, is clamoring for the preservation of the existing state of affairs where communal land rights are concerned. That urgent appeal comes at a time when the Toledo Land Rights Commission is under review and a new chair is yet to be appointed.
The ministry is looking to appoint a new commissioner in February of 2021.
Yes. What about the rest of the commission?
Your Honors, it is my instructions that the current structure of the commission is actually under review with a view to possibly expand the responsibilities and persons who make up that commission. We have not finalized that review at this point, Your Honors.
What the MLA may very well be faced with is having to return to the drawing board insofar as any progress that has been made when it comes to defining their lands. With a new government, a new minister, and a new commissioner in place, perhaps the end is near.
The Maya people would like to see that one day, when we finally have our lands demarcated, our titles in our hand, that we have a very rich and productive land that can still maintain our livelihoods and well-being. We understand that it will take some time to reach this goal. And in the meantime, however, our lands must be protected from any acts that might seek to erode and destroy the richness and integrity of our lands and resources.
Sitting in on the virtual session today, Minister Dolores Balderramos Garcia, whose portfolio includes Indigenous Peoples Affairs, spoke on a strengthening of the commission in the days ahead.
It was a very small commission to our understanding, and certainly within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will have the commissioner in place. But we do wish to keep at least 2 of the office staff that were actually on the commission so that there will be a level of continuity, but we may appoint perhaps another 2 or 3 persons so that we, if I could say it this way, that we can beef up the commission to be more effective, if I could say that.
For the Maya communities, notwithstanding a beefed up commission, the issue remains the continued incursions on communal land by so-called third parties.
We have been utterly concerned and have expressed time and time again to the courts and to the government the concern with the ongoing and increased incursions on our lands by third parties, by agents of the state, and by local and foreign investors without fully ensuring our free, prior, informed consent. As a point of fact, this was the basis and the origins of why we came to court in the first place back in the early 90s and then again in 2007 and 2010.
Reporting for News 5, I am Isani Cayetano.
Upon assuming office in November of last year, the People's United Party created a specific ministerial portfolio for Indigenous Peoples Affairs. That responsibility was given to Belize Rural Central Area Representative Dolores Balderramas Garcia, also the Minister of Human Development. This morning, she sat in as a guest during the compliance hearing and was called upon by Justice Jacob Witt to address the court. Minister Balderramas Garcia pledged to work with the Indigenous community to fulfill the mandate of the Briceño administration.
I believe my appointment signals a new day of respect for our Maya sisters and brothers and other Indigenous peoples such as the Garifuna people. And in addition to respect, we want to signal engagement and a level of seriousness. I have said to the media, and I would like to address your honors to say that we may not always agree, but I do want to indicate to this honorable court that we will be doing our job in a way of engagement, respect, and consultation. And I will be working very closely with Ms. Matut Tucker to make sure that on our side, the government fulfills its obligations. So with that, I will observe now, and thank your honors very much. I would say, yes, we do have, we are apprised of various matters in relation to this ongoing case, but being very new, we will be relying on Ms. Matut to advise us on the way forward in some of the more complex issues. But I do want to indicate to the court that we are in the process of now and very shortly will be appointing a new commissioner, not only for this matter, but also for Indigenous Peoples Affairs altogether. However, we anticipate that probably 90% of the work will be having to do with this case. And with that, I would ask Ms. Matut to join in if she can assist us, because as I say, we're just getting our feet wet, and I would appreciate her support.
In acknowledging government's solemn undertaking, MLA spokesperson Christina Koch says that they are elated by the newfound will to respect and recognize the traditional institutions of the Indigenous community.
We are pleased to report then that we have received clear indication from the new government that they will respect and give regard for the customary governance institutions of the Maya, that they will recognize it as an important part to the process of good faith implementation and engagement. This again is encouraging and refreshing to hear from the government. And so we anticipate that the free, prior, informed consent protocol will meet agreement from both parties sooner than later. This is urgent insofar as it will be the protocol to guide consultations, including consultations regarding implementation undertaken jointly by the government and the Maya. But more importantly, it will guide how third parties, agents of the state, and outsiders engage with the Maya regarding any interests on their lands and their resources.
Still to come, more from the opposition's press conference. Today, the Ministry of Education issued a memo to managements of all schools, the Belize Teaching Services Commission, and the BNTU, in which the matter of study leave with pay is addressed. In the memo, Chief Education Officer Yolanda Gongora states that the COVID-19 pandemic has heightened fiscal scrutiny and financial prudence, which has caused the ministry to re-examine its financial prospects, to prioritize expenditure and reallocate resources as necessary. As such, the ministry has decided to suspend study leave with pay approvals until further notice. Opposition leader Patrick Faber says the PUP government is going about it the wrong way. Faber says that the Briceño administration should have been more creative.
What the UDP would have done in an instance like that is to look in areas where the numbers of trained teachers are probably higher than in other areas and look to close off to the leave in those particular areas. Let's say, for instance, at the primary level in the northern part of the country, in the central and western regions, we have a higher number of trained teachers. The south, the situation there is not as good. So we have to keep on going there. That is what we would have recommended. We would have recommended some kind of shift, but you would not have said to the teachers altogether, no study leave for you. And these are the things that the government, I think, is failing at. You have to communicate and you have to find creative ways of doing things.
During its press conference, the opposition condemned what it described as mass firings across the country. Some 24 employees at the Novelas bus terminal in Belize City were let go last week. A total of 60 employees were released from the Department of Transport. The government says that many of these persons were phantom workers, but the opposition sees it as political victimization, and they plan to challenge the terminations in court.
The People's United Party promised, we are going to provide jobs. Well, they have done just the opposite of that. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Belizeans are illegally losing their jobs. Hundreds, just last week, Saturday alone, on one single day, in one single government department, over 80 persons, I believe, lost their jobs. Why? What is their crime? What is the singular crime that all of them have in common? They're not PUP stalwart supporters, I think. You know, because some of them, indeed, you know what is the reality? Some of them are PUP supporters, but maybe they did not wave their blue and white flag enough. But some of them are UDP supporters. But whatever it is that our Constitution provides protection, that persons cannot be discriminated against because of their political affiliation or lack thereof. We are currently exploring, along with the legal team in the UDP, the likelihood of pursuing a constitutional claim for discrimination on behalf of some of these people. Because some of them, there are clear cases that there's the singular reason for which they have been fired is that they are UDPs. That is something which is completely unacceptable.
The opposition also criticized the government for its grocery bag initiative and called out specifically Minister of Human Development Dolores Balderramas Garcia. In a recent interview, Balderramas Garcia told the press that there isn't enough money to assist everyone. Today, Mesopotamia Representative Shine Barrow criticized the minister for failing the people.
How is it that you will have a curfew, but the Minister of Human Development is now saying everybody can't get? I anticipated this would have been the position in the last House meeting, because in the last House meeting when she gave her statement from Minister, there was absolutely no plan, no discussion as to specifically the COVID-19 unemployment relief fund, the food assistance program, the boost, the pantry, which again, under a public state of emergency, these things are necessary. these things are vital. It is not as if we're under normal circumstances and people just want safety nets, which the government should provide. But under these circumstances where you're going to have curfews that restrict the operation of businesses, restrict the movement of people to sell their food on the street corners, the vendors can't sell food, people can't be out there to catch and kill. How will the people provide for themselves? So it is terrible failure on the part of this PUP administration to not lay out any transparent timeline, transparent description of what it is that they will do to respond to the state of emergency that we're in.
Former Governor General Dr. Dame Anita Gordon was laid to rest on Wednesday at the Lordridge Cemetery. While her send-off was stately, she was not always treated with the respect and dignity deserving of her position. In fact, in her retirement, she was often seen around the city where others who did not know her would make fun of the elderly woman. It is part of the neglect that was experienced when she retired to private life. There was no pension set aside for her then, and there still is none set aside for Governor General Sir Colville Young. As described by Prime Minister John Brisenia, it is a blight, one his administration is prepared to correct. Dr. Gordon's longtime friend Stanley Lazama shared an unfortunate incident with the media.
One time I went to buy along with my wife at Brody's, and she got sick in the at Brody's, and the guys, they started to laugh out of her and pass all kind of remarks. And I tell them, you know who is that woman? Nobody don't know who is she. I went and helped her, and I put her in a taxi, and I sent her home.
I think we should hang our heads with shame that is what happened to the first Governor General. That is why one of the things that we have to do, we have to look at the present Governor General, who has served us so well from it was 1993, 94, and still working even at the age of 90. That we have to make sure that when he retires, that we have a pension that would be able to, that he would be able to look after himself with some sense of dignity. And so we owe an apology to Dame Anita Gordon and her family for the way she was treated. And we have to make sure that as a country, we never, ever, ever do that to people that have served us so selflessly.
You can have your imported milk, but you'll have to pay for it. We'll have that story after the break. When Minister of Agriculture, Food Security and Enterprise announced that he was looking at protectionist policies in order to promote domestic producers, it wasn't welcomed with open arms. Some sections of the public were worried about their favorite imported brands, that they would disappear from store shelves. But Minister Hussein Mai says that that's not the aim of his proposals. He's simply putting in importation control measures that will level the playing field, which will essentially make those imported brands costlier and local brands more affordable. He says it is a plan that will boost domestic production to stimulate the economy and improve livelihoods. Today, News 5 was invited to Spanish Lookout, where we joined Minister Mai and other ministry officials to learn more about the dairy sector through the operations at Western Dairies.
If you prefer imported dairy products, you should prepare to shell out some extra cash to buy them. Imported cheese, milk, and yogurt will become more expensive if the government approves the imposition of taxes and other duties on the foreign brands.
We don't want to mislead the public by saying that you will not have your Jando milk. You will have it, but you will have to pay for it. If you want imported, you will have to pay for it. We are proposing, and I'm hoping to get the support from our cabinet colleagues, which I'm sure we will, to enforce the law by the imported paying GST. 1 and 2, we also propose to tarify, besides the GST, to put duties on imported products.
That's an importation control proposal from the Minister of Agriculture, Abelardo Mai. Today, he toured the Western Dairies facilities where he got a first-hand look at their operations. He says he wants to level the playing field for local manufacturers like Western Dairies, which is the largest dairy producer in Belize. The Spanish Lookout-based company produces a variety of fresh cheeses, milks, and yogurts, and a range of other dairy products without the artificial additives and preservatives found in imported brands. But their products are not flying off the shelves. According to Minister Mai, that's because many of the imported brands are getting tax breaks when they enter Belize, and because they also enjoy subsidies and other incentives in their countries that push down production costs, which is tough for local products to compete with.
There is an inability of the local product to be sold because of the unfair competition. When you look at the unfair competition, when you look at milks, processed milks coming into the country, paying zero duty, and in 2018, 2019, certain companies were not even paying GST. They were qualifying the imported milk as fresh milk, which it is not. So clearly, it is unfair competition to our local manufacturers, and that has to be addressed.
So my suggestion is to impose taxes on the imported brands, but to also reduce some of the duties that local producers have to pay. Mai believes that this will help to promote local products that will have a ripple effect on the economy.
The mere fact that you can lower, or that we are proposing to remove GST and to remove import duties from bottling and packaging equipment will make the cost go down. By that going down, then our product becomes more competitive.
And Chairman of the Western Dairies Board, Isaac Wolf, hopes that those control and incentive measures will be approved. He says that the company has had to cut down milk purchases this year due to tough times that they faced in 2020. And so he believes that there is room for increased production. Wolf believes they can produce more if the demand is there.
Yes, we can, because we are right at the moment. I am a farmer too. I milk cows, and we were led to reduce our production or contracts to 20% down from what it was from what we had on the farmers because we have too much milk coming in. We can't get rid of it. 2020 has been a very hard year for us, and still we let the contract stay where we had them, but we had to reduce it to 20% in 2021 because there was just too much milk. So with that being said, yes, we will do our best, but we like Mr. Minister already said, that it's not that they are cutting off the importations. They will control it. And I want to publicly thank him for that, because that will be a big help for us.
Western Dairy's production accounts for $3.2 million in milk and $1.9 million in cheese. It's a fraction in the value when compared to imported milk and creams at $21.8 million, while the value of imported cheese stands at $13 million. That's a whopping combined value of over $34 million. Mai believes this is a clear indication that the sector is ready to grow, and his policies will help to do that.
So we're importing 21.8, but we're only producing 3.2 million. It means that we can grow this industry. In terms of cheeses, this company only produces 1.9 million when we import 13 million. It means that we can grow this industry. And we can grow it only by making the right policies.
Reporting for News 5, I'm Andrea Polanco.
On Tuesday, the president of the Belize Hotel Association spoke of the underwhelming tourist arrivals following the airport's reopening. While stakeholders are hoping that the cold weather in the north will incentivize more travel to Belize, what about cruise tourism? Over the years, cruise travel has grown to be a significant player in the country's tourism industry. Before the pandemic, there were approximately 333 calls annually, bringing hundreds of thousands of tourists and valuable foreign exchange. In the first few months of 2020, cruise passenger arrivals dropped 24.9%, as a total of 31 fewer ship calls were made during the first quarter of 2020. Tejada says that 2021 is not looking better.
It's going to take, it's going to take, I would say, another 6 months for us to even see the touristic industry come back to some type of normality if the vaccine actually works as they're promising us. We do not see at this moment the cruise tourism coming to fruition in any of the Caribbean countries. We think that in terms of cruise tourism, we might not see much for 2021. We might see down November, December, but there's no solution yet in terms of cruise tourism because of the amount of people that are gathered in one ship. So we keep in contact with them, we're having meetings with them, but in terms of cruise tourism, we are not hearing much good luck from the United States.
There is significant backlash on the Port of Magical Belize project by a group of environmental NGOs. The developer is David Gegg, who represents the Port of Magical Belize. In 2017, Gegg signed a memorandum of understanding with the past administration to construct a docking facility along the south coast of the Sibun River. In an interview that year, Gegg told News 5 that the port would come at the cost of $150 million. Back then, an environmental impact assessment was not done. But today, the National Environmental Association Committee was scheduled to consider and discuss Gegg's multi-million-dollar project. However, a coalition of environmental NGOs is saying no to the massive port project. One of those organizations is Oceana Belize, whose Vice President Janelle Chinona wrote to the CEO in the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management, Dr. Kenrick Williams. Chinona informed Dr. Williams that Oceana vehemently objects to the proposal to dump dredge spoils in the Caribbean Sea. Chinona says that the scale of the proposed dredging is unprecedented in Belize, and based on documented international experience, The combined environmental impact will be far more significant than we can imagine.
We also have to reconcile with the fact that Belize is unique, and unique doesn't mean uncommon. Unique means only here, endemic to Belize, and special to Belize and only Belize. And the scale that has been proposed from these projects, which cannot be viewed separately or in isolation, they have to be looked at together, is just incredible. It's unprecedented. And looking at what's happened internationally, we have sent a series of documents that look at projects, for example, like what happened with the Miami port expansion. You know, the combined environmental impact there is far greater than even what the engineering corps anticipated. They're still studying and trying to determine the fallout from all of that. Dredge spoils there were dumped on mangroves and has caused just a pitiful list of damage and destruction. And it's just that we have to heed that warning that dredging, as Lisa has called out, how it's traditionally been done for all these many years, has caused and will continue to cause, if we continue to do it the same way, extensive coral mortality and critical habitat loss.
Witness protection is coming. We'll tell you more after the break. A joint police and BDF operation in the Corozal district led to the discovery of 2 marijuana fields in Consejo village. At the first location, 2,500 marijuana plants between 5 and 6 feet in height were found near a shed used to house processed marijuana. Under the shed, the patrol discovered croca sacks with over 14.6 pounds of ganja. The plants were uprooted and burnt. The shed was also destroyed in the fire. The team found another weed farm where 3,240 marijuana plants up to 2 feet tall. 3 sheds were found near this field with 11.5 pounds of processed marijuana. Those 2 were destroyed. No one was seen in the area during the operation. Meanwhile, on Tuesday in Belize City, police were able to remove drugs, firearms, and ammunition from the streets. The search of a resident on Hemsley Alley led to the discovery of a Sig Sauer pistol and a handgun along with 3 magazines. They also found 50 live rounds of ammunition and a box containing roughly 45 pounds of suspected cannabis in 17 parcels. A 16-year-old student who was at the residence at the time has been detained pending charges. Later that day, the officers searched an abandoned lot on Gentle Avenue and a water taxi and discovered a substantial amount of drugs. They found on board the water taxi a plastic bag with just over 7 pounds of suspected cannabis. No one took responsibility for the drugs, and it was retrieved and taken to the police station. Also at the abandoned lot, a plastic bag containing 368 grams of suspected weed was discovered. There was no one in the area, so it was labeled as found property. And while those drugs weren't linked to any individual, two cops, Dion Bellini and Joel Canton, were both busted with weed in separate incidents in the north in less than a month. Canton was caught with 28 pounds of weed last Thursday, while Bellini was picked up with 40 pounds in the last week of December. The cops were both arrested and charged. On Wednesday, Minister of Home Affairs Karim Musa told the media that it is concerning that the law enforcers are breaking the law, but that he has a zero-tolerance policy against cops who are engaging in criminal activities.
He made it very clear, Andrea, when I assumed my position as Minister of Home Affairs, that I would have this zero-tolerance approach when it comes to police abuse, police cruelty, police brutality, and illegalities like the trafficking of illegal substances. So far, we have been gathering excellent intelligence. I think it is all about the intelligence, and I want to commend the police department because, as you rightly pointed out, we've had a number of significant busts, some of them including officers of the law. And so while that is a sad day for us to report that officers of the law are engaged in illegal acts, it is also a day to celebrate that we have been cracking down on these offenses and we are taking action against these officers who are engaged in these activities.
And some very promising news delivered by Minister Musa on Thursday was that the Witness Protection Program is in the pipeline for Belize. Last week, the U.S. Embassy hosted the government of Belize in a second high-level roundtable to discuss the implementation of a witness protection and victim care program. The discussion centered on the program and the feasibility of implementation in country, as well as the existing legislation. Minister Musa was one of the government's representatives in that meeting.
It is a very important discussion moving forward when we look at getting more convictions for violent offenses in our country. As you know, one of the main sources of evidence in our justice system is eyewitness reports. And we have seen over the last 20 or so years where eyewitnesses have not wanted to volunteer or to continue with their statement after they have given it because they fear for their lives. And so it is a very real and present danger to our justice system. We have recognized that, and that is why we're having these discussions to come up with ways to implement programs, witness protection programs, so that we can get our eyewitnesses having that sort of confidence in giving their statements to police and following through on them. And so it's a huge step in the right direction to have this type of legislation. We are looking at all options at this time. Indeed, it's going to be a very costly venture. We have to recognize that. But at the same time, we have to engage the public. We have to ensure that the common man and woman, the common Belizean is aware out there that it will take buy-in from them as well to these types of programs to ensure that we build back the confidence in the judiciary.
And that's the news. Tonight's broadcast is available in text at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at News 5 Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us. And from all of us here at News 5, please remember to wash your hands, keep your social distance, and stay safe. Good night.